I think taking risks is like really important, like in filmmaking, like doing things that feel like they could fail, really trying to push out to the outer boundaries of what makes you curious. Like on one sense, like trying to sort of write projects or get involved in projects that have that like drive hook to them, that keep you up at night and you wake up in the morning and you're like, that's like the first thing you want to do. Like I think for me, I think it's seeing characters' faces and taking complicated problems in my life and dramatizing them.
Sawyer, welcome to the Story Arc podcast, man. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So this is our first time meeting, and I've seen your work online through Instagram and other channels. And I think you reached out to me about an actor that I had in one of my short films. So we kind of got a little bit connected, but I thought it'd be great to have you on the podcast since you're in Denver and you're a filmmaker, and there's not many of us out there, you know, at least spearheading the narrative, I guess the narrative vision. So it's great to have you on. I'd like to get to know you a little bit more and your background, your story in terms of like how you, I guess, felt the need or the desire to do more filmmaking. So where did it all start for you?
Yeah. Well, so I grew up in a artistic house. So my dad, he's a musician. So he was like when I grew up, he was a salesman and also a worship leader. And then my mom was an artist. Yeah. So a lot of, I suppose, creativity, like growing up. My parents had always said like especially my dad would be like to my brother's a musician. Yeah. And I grew up as a musician as well and then got into film. But my parents would always tell us that we should like follow our desires, like do what makes us passionate instead of, I suppose, the other thing, which would be like, oh, you have to get this job and then you have to get married by this age and then you have to do that. Yeah. So they really pushed us to like try things out, I suppose. And so I really like in high school, I did some like filmmaking stuff for classes. Like I think we were just filming on like, I don't know, maybe it was iPhones at that time.
How old are you?
I'm 28.
28.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. But then in college, I studied English during undergrad, and I was always really into writing. So like I would write short stories growing up, and I was on like a literature track in college, but I was like at some point I started making an audio drama podcast. It was like a 10 episode series, like hour long. Like I had like a bunch of actors come to my basement, set up all these mics, and I would write the scripts for these, and I would direct it. Yeah. And I had a co-writer. And through that process, I learned like Logic Pro X. I learned how to edit audio. I learned how to edit scenes. Yeah. And like how to find music cues.
Were you in college at that time?
I was.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And so that was like the first time I did something that was really like, it was pretty epic in scale. Yeah. It was like all storytelling. I was like trying to figure out how to create narrative arcs with different characters. And like, it felt like a TV show. Like, and it was a fantasy story kind of thing. And it was like a comedy and there was some dramatic elements. And I've even listened to it like years since I did it. And it's so bad now. Like, but like, there is a lot of things where like, oh my, like that prologue was actually pretty good. Like it still holds up, like stuff like that. Yeah. There are these things that felt like right away that they were clicking for me. Yeah. And then so when I graduated, nobody would hire me as a writer. I thought I would just get like a copywriting job. But somebody hired me as a video editor in Boulder. And that's kind of how I got my start into like filmmaking. Because the editing process from audio editing to film felt pretty seamless to me. There was just a few other things that were going on. And then pretty quickly, I wanted to start doing more narrative stuff, and that's how I got into that.
Yeah. So what? So then, where did you dip your toe in the water in terms of the narrative?
Yeah. So, So okay. So one thing I did in college that was video was this little video. It was like Jeff's Table is what we were calling it. Okay. Have you seen Chef's Table on Netflix? Yeah. It was like a parody of that. Okay. Where it was like this guy who'd accidentally made like a really like postmodern like Pop-Tart cheeseburger is what it was. And like the story was that like everybody like suddenly discovered this like guy who's living in this like trashy fraternity house as like an artistic chef, even though like he was just like the story was like he was smoking a bunch and like just doing drugs, and then it happened to create something that everybody thought was like genius. And so it was like a parody of Chef's Table, and that was like something, I suppose, like that, I don't know, that just like got me interested in like
and putting the images together. Because you're already good at creative writing and you're putting the story together. Was there something like, even growing up, did you like gravitate to movies at all, or a specific director, genre, or a style?
I honestly feel like all like my introduction into filmmaking has always been mostly through like writing, which sounds weird, but like so I read a lot in high school, read a lot in college. I suppose maybe the first film that like really stuck out to me that I was obsessed with was Pirates of the Caribbean 1. That film feels like I think it's like a perfect 90 minutes. Like the pacing of it is incredible to me. There's like all these, it's like a really, I don't know, like it has a really like tight kind of beats going to it, but then there's also these like really like surprisingly emotional moments to it.
Well, as much as we give, like, you know, I think Quentin Tarantino talks about this, about having, you know, whether it's a saga or multiple, like a series of movies, and how difficult that is to do. But as much as we give it a hard time for like the third and the fourth one, or however many that are out there, the Pirates, but like the first one was truly, like if it just was that, just the first one. And I think the second one was pretty decent as well, but like the first one, if it just was that, then it would be like one of the greatest movies. It's just like it's a terrific piece. Like the music score, the acting is incredible, the art department, production design, the locations, like it was very real. It was shot on location. So I mean, that movie itself like holds its own. But I mean, in other words, like that's still good to be inspired by even a mainstream movie. Like that's great. What even now, as you develop that craft even further, are there things that stick out to you as you've gone down the path a little bit more, that you're finding your voice and you're saying, you know, these are types of films that I gravitate towards? Yeah,
for sure. I mean, I think one thing that because when I go into making a film, I actually don't feel like I have like the cinematic vision first.
Okay.
Like for me, it's like, it's the characters and like what are two antagonistic things that are rubbing up against each other?
Yeah.
That's usually where I start. And in terms of like other inspirations, like I really like Martin McDonagh, if you know who that is. He did like In Bruges. He did Banshees of Inisherin.
Okay.
Seven Billboards. And like he's one of my favorites right now. I also really like the early like Yorgos Lanthimos stuff.
Yep.
The newer stuff I'm not as into, but like his early work, there's like an absurdity there that I really like. I like kind of like dramas that like push into the absurd, or comedies that kind of push into this absurd kind of thing. Like,
well, even watching like your trailer for a couple upcoming projects that you have, or at least one of them, I think it's called Rotten Sun.
Yeah.
Is that one? Okay. So watching that trailer, did you edit that yourself or someone else?
I edited the trailer.
Okay. Because it has like a very absurdism type of quality to it. Following, I guess that, but also a little bit horrific. It feels like an A24 film trailer.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
I don't know if that's what you were going for. Not that you're saying you're copying them, but they have, well, they come up with some of the best film trailers in terms of not giving too much.
Yeah.
But it also feels like a teaser as well. It's not like
it's kind of a teaser,
a full trailer, because you have like maybe 3 or 4 clips. It's not everything. It's just a few to sort of like, you know, and when it is a short film, I feel like a typical trailer for a movie now is more of like what a teaser is. Like, so making a trailer for a short film is a teaser for a feature film, if that makes sense. So you have to shorten it.
Yeah.
Because if it's a 10-minute,
if
so
I
you
showed
can't make
1 minute trailer,
it would
be, but so that trailer, it's like a 30-second trailer. I guess you don't know too much about what's going on, but like, I think all the trailer shows is that somebody did something and they're running. So like that's, and
so
the premise,
evoking that emotion, you know, I think people they think about the set pieces, they think about the explosions, or just just a standalone character, but I think they forget about the emotion of it. It's like, what is it carrying across? Like, what are we feeling in this moment?
Yeah.
And I think that's like a big component that you have to take when crafting a story is, yes, of course, you can't have a story without character. I've been thinking about this a lot of like, can you make a story without a character? Obviously, you can have abstract characters, like Everything Everywhere has rocks as characters, you know, in one part of the movie. So you can have abstract, but you can't really explain. Like you have to have characters, meaning there's conflict, desires, you know. So it's like fundamental to storytelling is you know, characters. However, it's the feeling behind the characters. It's like what the direction they're going and all of that. Do you feel the same way, or do you approach storytelling in a different light? Like when you first you know, start writing or coming to I guess the storyboard of ideas, that you don't start so much visually but with the characters. Can you expand upon that a little more?
Yeah, I mean, I think I kind of realized this too because I was watching an interview by Martin McDonagh, who's I just think he's such an incredible writer. But he also said like he kind of feels like in every film he misses the cinematic just a little bit, and he's like, oh, so he's kind of working on it. And I kind of felt like I admire that a lot because I kind of feel the same way. Like,
and when you say cinematic, just so we get our definition.
The cinematic as like almost like when like the Spielberg cinematic, like what we think of as like things that play for the shot.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Yeah,
for like that cinematic image.
Yeah.
And
you almost feel caught up with the frame more than the story.
Yeah.
Like you forget about it.
Yeah, for sure. And I think my favorite kind of thing to do is to try to fit the shots around the scene. Like, so I recently completed, it's in post right now, but completed the production on a film called The Apartment. And it's about two people who both get in an elevator and they find out they're both going to the same floor. And then they find out they're both going to the same apartment. Yeah. And so the rest of the film is them trying to figure out whose apartment this is. And like, so it's a kind of a comedy.
So it starts like friendly.
Yeah, kind of friendly,
but then
builds. The tension builds because they're both going to this, like, whose space is this? So like that's, and like they both have different problems with identifying like why they're not certain that this is their space or this is their apartment. But that one was very much like, let's figure out the blocking. How are they going to move around the apartment? Like where are they going to have their moments where they're like at each other's throat, or where are they going to be pals? Like, and like the whole film is just like them moving around the apartment, all this different. And so I think when I was thinking about like, how are we going to shoot this? It was very much where like, you know, we shot at my apartment. So I was like, okay, we can get, I can survey the space a lot beforehand to figure out where they can end up.
Because you live there.
Yeah, exactly. But it was also like, I felt like the shots were the last thing involved, if that makes sense. So it was first like this story, and then it was like, okay, these are the actors who are going to play it. And it's like, where are their strengths? Like, and then how are they going to move around each other? Yeah. And then it was like, the last thing was, and then how are we going to capture that? Okay. If that makes sense. Yeah. And I don't think I think there's a lot of different ways to approach making a film. I think sometimes it's like, I have the shots in my head. Yeah. And the actors are going to sort of fit this shot. And then I think there's the mode of like, well, I have this tension, or I have this like problematic that these characters are kind of embodying. And then how am I going to
craft the shots around
that? Like, why isn't it not a short story? Well, it's like, it's fun to see people embody these things. Why is it not a play? Yeah. Well, I don't even know how to do, like, where do you do that? Like, so a film can like, it's very accessible to everybody. Yeah. And it's a fun way to, I suppose, bring, I don't know, like philosophical issues that we deal with, or like,
it has
hard
like
emotions.
It has a way of, you know, bringing a conversation without talking about it. You know, bring it to the table. You know, at least that's my intention with it. Yeah. I think there's a lot of different modes of, you know, filmmakers, movie makers. I mean, because it is an entertainment industry. So taking something like Pirates, or even Jurassic Park or something like that. It's like they're fun. They're entertainment driven pieces, and you can always learn something from it, about the courage to, stand up against the adversity, or like the fear that you have, or, telling the truth or something like that. But I like something a little bit deeper. But again, it's not too preachy. It's not too on the nose. And so you can discuss some of these topics. So for instance, like your film, I'd like to know more about this one. What's it called with the apartment?
It's called The Apartment.
Oh yeah, that's what you said. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So in The Apartment, when you had the idea, did you say, man, I want to explore this sort of tension between two people, and it's an interesting idea, but at the end of it, I want people to be left with this. And it may not be like, oh, here's the application, the call to action, but it's more of like, I want them feeling this because this is a very real thing in life. Was there something like that for you?
Yeah. Like, I don't know. So I don't know if the ending of the film necessarily has a moral, if that's what you mean. It feels like an entertainment piece, but I think what I was trying to do with the film that might be kind of what is the message, or what could somebody be left with after watching this?
Yeah.
Is like, you find out, well, I don't want to spoil it, but it's more just like I don't know if you've ever experienced this, where you're like in your own place. You're in the place that you like. Yeah. It's your apartment, it's your office or whatever. Yeah. And you still don't like it, like there's still part of it that feels foreign.
Right.
Like, I wanted to just play on that experience.
Yeah.
Like, or like the neurotic, like second guessing something all the time. Which I think is like, I don't know, like what if you like ratcheted up that experience to the level of like where you live every day? Yeah. Like, oh, like, is this actually my place?
Yeah.
like
yeah.
And it's so weird because like, I think factually it's like, well, like, you might just be able to like go into the closet and like open up the tax files and like read okay, my name's right here or something.
Okay.
But it's like all of the like other parts of the apartment, like, oh, I don't actually know where I got that painting from. Yeah. Like, and that guy has a story and I have a story. It's like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, it's those kind of things. And it was a very absurd premise too.
Yeah.
And so like, how do you get people to buy into it when you know it's like, this is not going to happen?
Yeah.
Well, it's like, I think the comedy helps.
Right.
Like getting people laughing.
Yeah.
It's like that point when people want it to be true because they're having a good time.
Right. I think fundamentally a couple of things stand out, like with story, is it has to be interesting and you have to empathize with it. It doesn't mean you have to empathize with every character, like you feel for them, but you have to like be able to vicariously in some way put yourself in their shoes and be able to relate, and it makes a compelling story. But yeah, going back to the moral aspect of it, like, just to be clear, not every movie, or really any movie, needs to have like a clear message or moral to it. Yeah. But making them feel, I think that also the liberty of the filmmaker to choose whether they want to be more message driven or not, serves itself on a pendulum or a spectrum of how overt they are with a message. Yeah. However, I think like my favorite movies fundamentally don't give a message, because then it's like, that's no fun, but they make you feel so empathetic with the character that it makes you think, it makes you question, it makes you just open-minded to different perspectives, or like, what would I do in that situation? Or you learn things subconsciously. You don't even have to have a conversation with yourself. It's just, stories are so powerful that way. I think even Nolan talks about this after his first movie, or second movie, but first like big stint with Memento. Terrific movie. I'm a big really Nolan fanboy, and he's like a mainstream director.
Memento is probably my favorite one of his.
It's great. But in Memento, at the end of it, like, a reporter asked like, hey, what does the ending mean? And he gave like his ending, his like interpretation of it. And then his brother came up to him and said, don't ever do that again. Let the audience decide their own interpretation, because the moment you do it, you close off any other open-ended discussion. And I think that is an essence of the beauty of filmmaking, or really just art in general. I wouldn't say it can't just be cornered to filmmaking, because we've already discussed it can be entertainment, but art in general has like an open-ended discussion that you can have. And I think it begins to fall away from art when it becomes too narrow, when it becomes like, here, this is what I want you to think this way.
Yeah.
And I want to like make a caveat with it. I know I'm going on this long rant, is that it's okay to have films that are a little more direct.
Yeah.
I tend to like films that are a little more indirect and allow the passenger of the story to sort of make their own direction as they're guided by the story parameters. Like I enjoy watching movies like that and enjoy making those.
Yeah. Well, I kind of have something to say on that, because I have a philosophical background too. So like my academic backgrounds are like English and philosophy.
Okay.
And I think about those two things kind of as in an antagonistic way, because philosophy, I think, always throws like a thesis at you, and it's trying to prove something. Like this is this. It's like this equals that. It's kind of where you get like the bare essentials, I think. And with
pigeonholes you.
Yeah, with what you're describing, like even like in Bruges, which I just talked about McDonough's work a minute ago, but even within Bruges, it's like, that film doesn't posit any positive thesis, but what it does do is I think it exposes us as the audience to the mechanics of empathy. Like, because have you seen that film?
Yeah,
So it's like this character who kills a child, and you end up somehow loving that person and rooting for them at the end of the film, even though they make all of the most taboo jokes throughout the whole film. They have a terrible attitude. Like everything about them, somehow on the surface, you'd think that you're supposed to hate this person. The film is able to work like its magic on the audience.
Yeah.
And you're left with like, okay, like that was a crazy trip. Like, how is it that like this character who is like the most evil child killing character is like this person that you kind of love at the end of the film?
Yeah.
Like the way that film can expose, the way we relate to things, I think, is interesting, without necessarily positing that like this is what you have to think, but it's like this is how you think. You know?
Do you think this is really interesting? Because do you feel like, because I've had this sort of conversation and argument with like, I guess in my own mind, is like, one, does it take a certain level of maturity to watch a film like that to recognize that? Because if you're maybe not a mature person, or you're not thinking, and you're looking at this as the next, Jurassic Park movie, and you're just being entertained, then you may take some of the vices and apply them to your life in a negative aspect. So you have to be proactive when it comes to some of those films. So one, the question of maturity, and then two, in the broader question, is there a danger to some films that aren't giving sort of a thesis with it and just leaving it open-ended? Or like, as filmmakers, is there a responsibility with that? Because I kind of wrestle with like, we have free speech. We can share, our mode of expression. But I think it's mingled too much with entertainment, that people don't watch it with a proactive mind of like how to learn from these characters, to be a better person. And instead they're like, yeah, man, that character was sweet, dude. I want to be not a child killer, but I want to be like I want to resonate, or I want to, I guess, have some of those attributes.
It's like, does this film give me permission to be a jaded hedonist or something like that? Like it's kind of like, I feel like it's a similar question that I think people ask with video games as well, maybe. Like, does playing violent video games affirm violence? That's a difficult question. I don't think I have. Here, I'll give you like a partial answer. Maybe we can unpack it more. Like, I think the question of like, violence. Let's just bracket that for a moment. Like, the question of violence and the human capacity for violence, I think it's almost like an absolute, if that makes sense. Like, I think everybody has violent tendencies, and I think there's better or worse ways of expressing violence. So there's obviously playing video games, like, oh my gosh, you're like you're a soldier and you're shooting the enemy, and like there's something going on there that's like weird, but like I think it it's like a fun, playful way to engage with some of that.
Yeah, now we're deep into the science and psychology of this, because you probably wouldn't have a video game of like, you know, the Nazis capturing the Jews, you know, in the Holocaust and putting them in concentration camps.
Right.
Like that is like the video game. You know, it's like, well, hey, violence is, you know, it's just a game, right?
Yeah.
Like so, I feel like, you know, so in other words, we're a little bit getting off on the philosophical rant of like what is morally acceptable. I'm not saying like I appreciate the conversation because it is important. And I did ask it. But yeah, like you bring up a really good point about video games, and I didn't want to cut you off. So finish what you were saying.
I was just saying, I think there might be something similar there between like what film does and what video games are for people. Yeah. Like, I mean, so Tarantino is like, let's say Clockwork Orange. Like these are like the ultra violence, you know what I'm saying? You know, ironically, I feel like Tarantino is able to do violence in a really strange way because it's like the violence is so absurd, like at the end of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, but there's like a minimum threshold that he meets for justification somehow. Or Django Unchained, like, well, he's a slave, so it's like you get these really like, it's like these like you hit this threshold for like, okay, we can morally participate because somehow this character has met the qualifications just barely for this crazy violent act. But like, I don't know if after watching a Tarantino film, I feel like the impetus for violence so much as like this, like my violent whatever is satisfied, if that makes sense. And I think like I'm very much I suppose like I think UFC is almost like something similar. Like it's a way
we put
of
two guys in a ring,
guys just like fighting each other, and it's like a better scenario than like let's like no violence and then it returns somewhere in like its most horrific form.
Right. Yeah.
So maybe I think we're not having these little outlets of creative violence.
But it is it is something I kind of like think about a little bit. I think it's the challenge of the dichotomy of it's supposed to be entertainment.
Yeah.
And also if you're bringing to the table a very heavy topic or conversation, then I mean, just think about it. Like, hey, we're gonna go watch a movie on Friday night. You know, it's date night or it's whatever. You know, you're going out, you're getting popcorn, you're literally sucking on a sour gummy worm, and you're watching somebody get decapitated. Like, there is somewhat of like a twisted aspect to it.
Yeah.
But so in other words, I think you have to. There's not like a place in the industry where like it's readily acceptable where you prepare yourself to go into like a heavy conversation. Whereas, it's a film, it's going to be exciting, it may be entertaining, but there's a heavy note to it. I don't think everyone has, maybe it's the maturity or whatever to distinguish the two. It's like, we're not going to just watch this for fun, but there may be something a little heavier here that we should take away.
Yeah, and
maybe I'm overthinking it.
No. I love this kind of stuff. And so on the Rotten Son film, which you said you watched the trailer for that, there is a very violent act in that film. Somebody hits another person with their car. And you know, one person had told to me, when they saw one of the early edits, they're like, man, I wish I saw like a bloody leg or like a contorted body or something like that. And that was a choice I deliberately didn't want to show. I wanted to just focus on the hit and then the reaction of the person, the person who committed the crime.
Right.
And I think there would be a different. I think so. Like, and it's hard to like answer that question of like. Who should be watching which films? Are they ready for this kind of film?
Yeah.
Like those are difficult questions. But I think on the other side of it, like when you make a film, you're like, what does the choice of like blood and gore do versus what does the choice of like not showing that, but showing the impact on like the soul through like a close up on the character who committed the crime? Like, what does that do?
Yeah.
So I think that's where I feel more equipped to explore that question.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like filmmakers are real concerned, and I get that. Storytellers, artists in general, they're not real concerned with the moral implications or consequences. They're more just thinking about, this is a story that needs to be told. And you're using different vices or different aspects of the story. And, you know, I mean, since ancient times, there have been some pretty, you know, ethically questionable stories in terms of like what the characters do, you know? I mean, even if you take the Bible itself, it has some like pretty, if you made a movie about every story in the Bible, that would be challenging, right? In terms of what goes on in the story in the Bible. But like, this is how we communicate a lot of times, certain aspects of it. So it is interesting to talk about, you know, is there an ethical parameter for filmmakers in the story itself? Obviously on set there is, but like in the telling of the story, should there be? And what is that? It doesn't seem to indicate like there is much of one. And I don't think maybe the conclusion that we've kind of come to is like, you shouldn't go to bed at night really worried about how people will take your film. I mean, maybe you should, but it's a different, we're really deep into this right now, you know, I wouldn't say like we're, or myself, like completely qualified to answer this for the whole industry, but it's something I think you should think about. I think if at anything, if you have at least a little bit of percentage of your mind or your soul is saying, you know, is this like good for society? I think it's good to at least have something that like that, instead of just like, we're just doing it, you know, as twisted as we can make it because it brings an audience. That I feel like, then don't do it. But if there's something that you're trying to share about, you know, crime or violence or immoral things, whatever it is, then, you know, by all means share that if you can. I think it kind of gets in the gray area of, you know, what's right or wrong, you know, with that. But
I mean, have you seen the new film Bring Them Down? It's like this Irish film. It has Barry Conan. I think is and then this other guy. I was thinking about that film in relation to like a Tarantino film. Because that film's about violence, Bring Them Down, and a Tarantino films are always about violence. But when I watch a Tarantino film, it feels like I'm going to like a gladiator arena in the audience, like, oh my gosh, you know. And then, but when I watch Bring Them Down, it's a film of like, you feel the violence viscerally. Like, I don't think in a Tarantino film you necessarily feel it, whereas in Bring Them Down, which I think is a brilliant film that. I don't know, like displays violence, talks about violence, like has a lot of messaging around violence. It's like it as an audience member. So I went to see that film, and there's like maybe 8 people in the audience. I went with my partner Taylor, and by the end of the film, everybody had left, which was a strange thing because there's a lot of like animal slaughter in the film. And I even at one point was like, should we go? But I'm glad we stuck it out because the film is about like, it's almost like a biblical proportion film in the sense of like, it's these two guys in Ireland who are fighting over sheep. It's like really simple premise, but things like explode from there, and you get like roped into unhinged. But it doesn't seem like any act in that film was like necessarily wasted for just the pure pleasure of the audience. Like, it feels like you're drawn into the experience of the characters in a way that I don't think a Tarantino film does.
That's interesting. I don't even know because I don't.
But
I think it's a really I think it's a really interesting conversation that I'm sure some other people would have some insight on it, but I don't think it's talked about as much. I know it's talked about in a very cut and dry way. Like, there's that famous interview with Tarantino and the guy like reporting about like violence, and he's just asking him like, you know, what do you say about all the violence in his film? And he's like kind of shuts it down. And there's a very like famous interview, like you can check it out on YouTube. But I think people they look at it too binary too. It's like, it's either this or it's that, it's right or it's wrong. But I think there is a nuanced conversation with that. But I don't think people are having that conversation. As from what I can gather, it almost seems that people rush to whatever's trendy or popular or whatever they're just trying to lean into to explore this avenue without any other like thought of the implications it could have. But I love how art can be innovative and explore topics and ideas that are a little more taboo and hush hush in society. It's good to explore that. But you know, and I don't think you're responsible for every person who watches your film and takes it in another direction. You know, even the film that I made, obviously it's light and it's not too violent, but a guy does commit an act of crime, you know, but we make, you know, it's fun. But someone could take that in the wrong way, you know? And so it's kind of like reading the cultural temperature. But I like the incentive to move people. And when I say move, it doesn't mean it has to be clear messaging, but you're moving people to at least like challenge their faulty perspective, move people to a positive direction. And you could do that through sort of really heavy content that's, you know, just really terrible, violent. It could be that way, but at least it moves people in a better direction, or at least contemplative direction. Because I think we're in the business of contemplation more than just, I guess you could say, actualization, in terms of like someone is leaving and they're a different person. But it's more contemplative. It's reflective. It's like, oh, that's interesting. I'm considering that. I'm pondering that. And then maybe you hear another story or watch another movie on a similar topic, and it begins to grow and shape your worldview or your value system. So we've talked a lot about this. Let's jump over to more of like your process.
Okay.
Like how does an idea pop into your head? Like with filmmaking, I find it really interesting how other filmmakers come to a conclusion of anything, you know, any story that they want to tell. How does it first come to you? And what is your process? Do you write it down? Do you write feverishly into the night? Do you write a scene? Is it a log line? But where does that idea start for you?
Yeah. I could give like really specific examples. So like the first more serious film that I did was called Her Mother's Eyes. It's a short film. And that film, I had gotten the idea after watching Shutter Island.
Okay.
In the film, Her Mother's Eyes is about a lobotomy, but it's about like a lobotomy within a family, that a mother lobotomizes her daughter. And I suppose that like where I got that idea from was, number one, this lobotomy thing is really interesting, like thematically, like what is a lobotomy? It's like a neutralizer of subjectivity. Like it kind of reduces someone's harsh points to null. If that makes sense.
That's a really, could you also describe it as apathy or no?
Yeah. It's like interjecting apathy into somebody maybe. And then I was thinking about generational differences, especially today. Like, and also I wanted to subvert the idea that maybe like the adults always have the best interests of the kids. I think it's probably easy to say like on large themes that kids usually don't have the best interests of anybody. But I think, and then like the next one is like the adults maybe have the best interest of the kids because they've kind of grown up. Yeah. And I wanted to sort of play with the dark sides of that. Like what I don't know. Like that's kind of where the film's ideas came from. And then I wrote a lot of it. Actually, I was like sitting in a bathtub. Like I had like my laptop. Wrote a lot of it. I do a lot. At least at the time, I was doing a lot of writing in the bathtub for some reason.
Yeah. Filled up.
Yeah, filled up. Okay. Not like empty. Like filled up.
I didn't know. Yeah. There's so many visuals of bathtubs.
I know. Yeah. Stuff, Sorry to throw that visual in everybody's head. But, So I think it's like starting from an idea that really hooks you, and I don't think we ever know why. Like. And then we try to unpack it as we're going. Like, why is this idea hooking me so much? Yeah. Like, what the heck, you know? Yeah. And then the apartment one, so the Rotten Sun idea had come from me driving. And this guy, I live downtown, and there's this guy for the longest time right outside my apartment. I'd like turn out of the garage, and then I would hit a stoplight, and then the stoplight would go green. And there's this guy who'd just be kicking a soccer ball in the middle of the street. And I just thought about like, I'd be late for something. He's just there, and you'd honk and he wouldn't move. And it's like, well, what if you just like ran this person over, that's again, like a really dark.
Yeah.
I think a lot of my films actually kind of have like a dark core to them.
Yeah.
Because I think it's like a nice place to work those things out. Like I had this feeling of like what would it be to run somebody over? He's so free right now, like he's like not abiding by any laws, and here I am like in my car with my seatbelt on doing the stoplight thing, and it's like that juxtaposition was really interesting to me. Like for a brief moment, if like the most lawful would traverse into the chaotic, and then you'd see how the most chaotic is this kind of innocent, like uncivilized mindset, maybe. I don't know. I mean, I'm trying to like, how do I answer your question?
No, I think
in a general sense, and the specifics is really easy. In the general sense, I think it's always like something that comes by surprise, maybe, or just like hooks on to me, and I'm like, what is that? I have to.
Do you write
like,
it down
explore.
immediately?
Yeah. In my notes app, it's just everything. It's just
how much do you flesh out when you get the idea? As much as is there for you, like. It's just an idea, so kind of like a log line, like a sentence or two, or do you flesh it out even more in that moment?
It's usually like an event, like what if one person did this to this person, or like what if this happened between two people, and then I start thinking about like the like how they would talk to each other, like what would they sound like, and then after the voice comes in, then you start picking the identity a little bit more, like okay, what names could you give these characters, what other attributes, and then you kind of start to see a shape take place, and then it's like, well, what's missing here that could really bring this to a story or something, if that needs to be there, or maybe it's already there, but
What part of the process do you enjoy the most?
I think it's those moments where you're writing dialogue and you're laughing out loud to yourself. Like that is amazing. I don't know if you've ever.
I'm laughing because it is true. It's like when I write dialogue, it's amazing how much you go into another world. At least the way I'm wired is that's why it makes sense to sit down and write as much as you can, and not 10 minutes here, 10 minutes there. It doesn't work that way. And there's I have some whole thoughts about writing and getting to that process, and everyone has their own method. But when I sit down and actually write, I just feel like completely saturated into this world and writing dialogue and characters. And then typically you go back and read it the next day and it's awful. You're like, that wasn't that funny or as like cool or serious. And sometimes it is. It's like a marriage between the two. It's like, well, you kind of got to get back into the spirit of it. And then you're like, oh, now I see where I was going with that. And it needs some course correction, and it was a little corny or dumb. But
I also think like that, whatever that space is when we're writing, like maybe you share this thought. I think there's like, sometimes it's like you write something and you're like, oh my gosh, like, yeah, that is funny or that's good. And then you tuck it away. And then other times it's like you write something and then it's like you want to close it down. So you're like, yeah, that was good. And you close it down because it is a painful, it's like, it's a really painful, I think like brain wise. It's like you're reaching out into all these places trying to make associations in like a void space a little bit. You're like, well, like what should happen here? Like what could go like, and I think after a while,
there's too much divergent like ideas, right? Like, or sometimes I feel overwhelmed with like, you could go down this path or this path, and you can think about, 2 scenes ahead, like, well, then it will lead them down. Is that the path or direction I want to go? I feel like that's sometimes the hardest, is picking a path to say, this is where I want the character to go in this conversation. But sometimes it's good to have that liberty and the freedom of like, well, let these characters flesh it out and see where they go. And then we'll figure that out. What do you feel like when you write, like you try to adapt a little bit of a minimalist approach to, like less is more when it comes to dialogue?
Yeah, dialogue is something I obsess over. Like I'm on version 19 right now of this current film that I'm working on, and all of the scenes have been locked for a while, but it's the dialogue. It's like what the characters say, like how it, and then like, you know, of course, when you write it, you hear it one way, and then you do a table read, you hear it in a completely different way. I don't know if I'm necessarily a minimalist when it comes to dialogue, but I'm not a maximalist either. I try to find like stuff that feels, I don't know, like as punchy as it can be, like as like motion oriented as it can be, stuff that like is moving. And yeah, like, I don't know. It's also difficult, I think, I mean, one of the things I think you'd said at the beginning was something about finding your voice. Yeah. Or like what that process is. Like, I think it's really hard to reflect on the nuances of one's own preferences on this stuff. You kind of just hope that people start to pick it up for you.
You're saying like it's hard to know what your voice is and also have that voice at the same time. Like, because it's a constant sort of feedback loop. Because you know, you want to share it with other people, but maybe your voice is an attestation of other people's voices, like people that inspire you, art that you've seen, music that you've listened to, other movies that you've watched. So it's this sort of conglomeration of that, but it's also you at the same time.
Yeah, like I feel like Wes Anderson is the type of filmmaker where like I kind of feel like he knows his voice, but it kind of feels like a caricature, like he does caricatures of himself. Like that's a kind of a diss, I suppose. But that's kind of how I feel sometimes. Like lately when I've watched his more recent films, it's like he's doubling down on a voice that he's really conscious of. And I kind of feel like, I don't know if everybody has the same relationship to their style as maybe somebody like that does. Yeah. Like could everybody so easily recognize their own style? I don't know. I don't know if I can. Maybe I haven't made enough films.
Yeah. That's an interesting point of all of that, because it's like Wes Anderson, we watch him for his style. Yeah. Because of his unique voice, not so much of how it really makes us feel. Mm-hmm. And maybe there's a small percentage of that. And I don't want to speak for anyone else. I'm not like a huge fan of Wes Anderson as a filmmaker I am, as someone who has his own voice I am. How he expresses that it's very clear and very distinct. I'm a fan of that. How it makes me feel is like sometimes I'm not following it. Sometimes I'm like, I don't know, I'm just not as interested. Yeah. But it's so unique and different that it's interesting. I think the balance between like let's say someone who's super mainstream, like Tom Cruise, and Mission Impossible. I love the Mission Impossible movies in terms of like the entertainment. Like they're just great films and like the stunts he does and all of that. But he will say, I am making this for audiences. Like it's for them. So the subjective nature of like you're creating a script that you believe that other people will like, whereas Wes Anderson doesn't care. I'm speaking for him, but in terms of like he's just doing it based off his voice, and then other people are willing to pay for that. So I think as a filmmaker, deciding what path you're going down and then the mixture of the two. And I guess also the point of like, can't speak for Wes Anderson, but my kind of like my like layman's kind of assumption is like he might have an idea of what his voice is in a way that, like for me, it's like I think I encounter like my voice, I could say, in the moments I'm writing where I'm like, okay, that's hilarious or that's really funny, but it's really hard to describe it. Like how do you give descriptive quality to it? I don't know, but you kind of hope over time that that thing accumulates in your projects. Yeah, in the canon of your and your filmography, maybe, it begins to emerge like a theme.
And maybe like other people can describe it. But I don't know if it's like, I think it might be more foreign to the self, if that makes sense. Like I see. That would be at least that's my take on it, I think.
Because you live with you. Yeah. So it's hard to describe you. Yeah. Yours just, other people Yeah, because I think that's part of it is the constant present of self is hard to, you contrast yourself with other people like, yeah, I like steak over chicken, you know, or whatever preference it is, or I like this style over that. So obviously you're making that,
I'm the steak guy.
yeah, you're making this distinction,
yeah.
But it's hard to do it because you're always with you. But other people begin to pick up on that. I noticed that after a couple films that I made that I didn't think I had any like specific style, but a friend of mine said, I can see you have a specific voice. And I'm like, I don't see it. And it doesn't even matter if it's a compliment or not. It's just like, I guess to have a voice is a compliment, but I thought I was like, that's kind of cool, but what is it? Like, what do you mean by that?
It's because you're in the weeds, you know, like you're in there and like, that would be at least that's how I think of it. Cause I feel the same way. Like, I'm like, well, like, what is it? Like, where, like, I can't see myself yet.
Right.
But, I think maybe it's.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think like conceding to other people's, like, it's hard to be true to yourself. You know, what is you? What is yourself? And how much of that is like still a work in progress. Maybe that's a bad way of describing it, but like you're growing as a person in terms of your experiences, your perceptive nature of learning about the world and your interests and all of that. Like for me, I'm the type of person who's like in constant evolution. Like I'm always curious. I'm always learning about things. But I've noticed now as you get older, whoever you are, and you're very like self-aware of those things, is that you begin to see a lot of things that when you were a kid, or maybe high school is a hard time because you're so like insecure. But when you're a kid, a lot of those things that interest you also come surface level as an adult, but in a more adult fashion. Like for instance, I've always loved being like inspired, like things that just, you know, I go in the backyard and I would like commentate, like as I was like the football commentator, I would like, you know, throw the ball to myself and catch it. And I love like the whole, like the fanfare around like sports and inspiration, you know, and I think that's cool. And I feel like that theme also finds itself in movies that I do, regardless of if it's an athletic movie or anything like that. It's just, I like to inspire, you know, I like to move people like in a positive way. I like that. And then there's other things that begin to, you know, stack on top of each other to make you your voice. But like we're talking, like it's hard to sort of notice that, but it's good to like take moments of reflection. Like, okay, who am I? Is this the direction I'm going? And everyone's different. And I think, again, that's what makes art so beautiful is the unique perspective that people have and that expression to that. And the only difference, I think as filmmakers, like we're trying to grow our skill and then be true to our voice and then try to understand that. That's basically it. Is, you know, there is a skill set to making a good movie. You can be a bad filmmaker in terms of your skill. But like being a good storyteller is not objective, you know? Being a skilled storyteller is objective, but not being one that people want to listen to. Like Wes Anderson it'd be a great example of that. Like that's not everyone's cup of tea, you know? So he's not objectively a great storyteller. In that sense, like, it's a subjective experience that people are like, yeah, this is awesome. You could say objectively he has a great, unique way of expressing himself, but that's the beauty of story is maybe it also doesn't put as much weight on us as filmmakers. Like go out and tell your story, not your personal story. You could do that too, but you're like what you're passionate about, what you're eager to explore and express and share. Tell that story, but don't feel like you've got to be the best at anything. Be a skilled storyteller and then tell your story. I think it's the application that I get. You know, from
sure.
That.
Yeah, I mean, hearing you say that makes me think too. Like, I think taking risks is like really important. Like in filmmaking, like doing things that feel like they could fail. You know, like really trying to push out to the outer boundaries of what makes you curious. Like, I think that's a really interesting kind of thing to do as a filmmaker today. Like, I think especially on the passion projects, on the narrative stuff, there's not much to lose. So I think doing that.
Yeah. Just, go experience, go out there and, fail forward kind of thing, like test some things out.
Yeah.
What do you feel like people, maybe just starting out, people get wrong with filmmaking, in storytelling? What are like the major things that people are missing when it comes to telling a good story?
Mm-hmm. That's like, I feel like, I've only been doing this for 6 years and I'm pretty young. So I kind of feel like I feel like there's so much that I'm missing.
Yeah, I get that.
But I kind of think like, I don't know. Like, I think on one sense, like trying to sort of, write projects or get involved in projects that have that like drive hook to them, like that keep you up at night and you wake up in the morning and you're like, that's like the first thing you want to do.
Yeah.
Or like the things that like hook our obsessions. I actually think that that's a really important thing for whenever you're in a project. Like I would say kind of do that. But like that's kind of like, I think an organic thing. Like some people can find that out pretty easily. And I suppose the second thing is like, I think having some time, I think everybody just in general who's getting into film and they don't know like what they want to do with it yet. Cause when I got into film, I didn't necessarily know I wanted to do narrative. But I just started playing around with it. And I did. So like my narrative background, my storytelling background connected with film, but it wasn't like I had just immediately had the idea. I think some people do, but I just didn't have the idea of like, I'm going to be a filmmaker and make film. Like it felt so sporadic and like messy, like the process of like bumping into this, bumping into that. But I think trying to like really hone in on like what it is about film as a medium that is important to people, like to you, and to why you think people should be watching your stuff, maybe like something like that, like trying to isolate a very particular thing about it. Like what is it,
Yeah. So what is it then?
Yeah, it's something I think about. Like, I think for me, I think it's seeing characters' faces and taking complicated problems in my life and dramatizing them.
Yeah.
So like on this new film that I'm working on, I'll be shooting in April. The film title is Mannequined. And I was thinking about like, because a lot of people have asked me where have I gotten the idea from. And it's about this woman whose boyfriend turns into a mannequin. Huh. And this happens kind of in the world, like in this like film world, like it happens to people sometimes. So it's a semi-normal thing. But her case with her boyfriend, it's like a more severe case. He's a mannequin for a long time. And I think people asking me like, where did you get the idea from? And then trying to reflect on it has helped me realize like the importance of filmmaking for me. And it's like, I got the idea from my relationship. Like it wasn't on the nose, but it was like, oh, like I might be a mannequin sometimes. Like when my partner tells me to like, she's like, I told you to close the cabinets and you like left them open or something like that. Or like things like that, where it's like things go like in my head and out the other.
Yeah.
I think that's where the idea came from. It's like, that's kind of like me just like checking out a little bit.
Yeah. It makes for a great short film, that sort of
I hope so.
that idea. Like I think that's what short films have, these really great ideas. Like being fleshed out into a feature would be interesting. But I love the idea and how you draw inspiration from things that are, I guess it's like metaphors to life. The absurdism that you talked about, I would say I would call that one more abstract, but it's like, but living in like this world where people sometimes are mannequins, I think is very fascinating. And if I watched it, I would immediately think, oh, well, obviously that's not true, Yeah. People don't. So there's another thing to learn here. Like what is the story here? I think you can find a lot of those like on Vimeo, like all these really interesting short films that are like that. But I would say too, like the magic, there's the magic of filmmaking, and then there's the why. Like, why do we feel the need to express ourselves in this way? And then there's the what. Like, what is the content and where is it coming from? I find that whole matrix of information to be just incredibly fascinating. Like, where's it coming from?
Yeah.
Why am I compelled to do it?
Yeah.
And the process of putting it together and putting it out there, and then somehow people relate to it. It's very interesting. And I feel like there is a sort of like I guess you could say a spiritual thread, like a magic to it. Like, this is really interesting, why humans decide to tell stories. And I think there's definitely some deterministic reasons why it's relatable, things like that. It helps us simulate an alternative reality and then draw conclusions from that, as opposed to like what an AI language model would do. I feel like that's a great reason, but I think there's a beauty to it too. Of it's part of who we are intrinsically is to tell stories and relate in that way. And some do it for entertainment, and some do it like therapeutically, right? To just get it off your chest, to share something.
Yeah.
And I find it all so very beautiful.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think it could be both too, like entertainment and a therapeutic process.
Yeah.
Like, I kind of think, I also think like generally like my kind of intuition on the human storytelling stuff, like, which is obviously a really common theme for just like any period of history.
Yeah.
I think like living period is a really difficult thing for people, for humans, you know? So I think having avenues of like getting into the cave, putting stuff on the screen, like trying to like distance ourselves from reality a bit, like, or from immediate experience, I think is like a really important part of living. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
In an ironic sense.
So you're saying that it's born out of adversity, basically. It's born out of like a conflict, like the complicated nature of life sort of bears the nature of storytelling.
I think so. Yeah.
I think it's more than that, though. I think that is an aspect. I think it is
there's probably
like
more there. Yeah.
Like our inhibition to express or share, like any experience, because it could be joy, it could be things that aren't very complicated.
Yeah.
But I do think it is a layer of complexity for sure.
Yeah.
And I think a good therapeutic, like one of the best therapeutic remedies is story. You know, it's like it also is a great clarifier too of thought. You know, it carries so much like innotation of like what I'm trying to carry across minus the words. It's a story.
Yeah.
It helps us also understand like just really complicated issues or complicated things.
You know, I remember. So, like, I remember on doing a showing for a previous film, somebody saying, "What did you want people to get from this?" Like when I was on stage in the panel, and I remember being so put off by that question, like not wanting to answer it, and just kind of floated it to the other people on the stage who were involved, like the director of photography, and they kind of answered it pretty easily, which I thought was surprising. But because I remember as a kid asking a musician over email about a song that I really liked by his, and asking him what it meant, and then telling him my interpretation, and then him just kind of saying, "Oh, I don't really know," like just kind of brushing it off. And I think from like a audience perspective, that question is so annoying when it's refuted. When somebody, a filmmaker, you ask them, what are you trying to say? And they just don't, they like brush it off.
Yeah.
But I think once you're on the other side of it, and you're a filmmaker or you're a writer or you're creating something, and somebody asks you that question, you're like, that is the actual communication. Like, it's not like I have this this idea.
It's like so what you're saying is, what are you trying to say? The answer is watch the film.
You just watched it.
Like,
yes, exactly.
It's like a painter. Like, what did you try to mean by that?
Yeah.
Like, you know, that's what I tried to mean.
Yeah. Like, and like you might have like kernels of ideas that are just easily like linguistify or like
you
put
can
into
communicate.
Language. But like the putting it all together, that is where
the body of work that I just produced is not so easily communicated in words. It has to be expressed in like, I don't know, what did you take from it?
Right. Like we picked the mediums for a reason, like because they make us feel a certain way, right? Yeah. And it's like, oh my gosh, like that film does, like if you make something like that, it does stuff that I just couldn't say and communicate. Yeah. And that's a reason too, I think, of why it's fun to, and why it's important to do kind of like creative projects and art. Yeah. Because it's a different form of communication. Yeah. It's not as like clear sense making kind of stuff. Like it kind of like especially film crosses a lot of genres. Like you got music in there, you have just like color science working. Yeah. Like
so much going
these
on.
Really like strange thematic bindings for no reason. Right. Or no apparent reason, you could say. Yeah. And then you have the dialogue and you have the actors and you have what they like. There's all this stuff working in it, which is cool. And it definitely leaves the artist's own level of sense too. Because like even in the editing process or finishing up a film, you're like, this is so different than I initially thought. Like it's all still there, but it's also not. Yeah.
It comes out something different. You put it in the oven and then it's like, wow, this is it's a lot different. But well, man, I really appreciate your perspective. You said you were working on a couple other projects. What's on the horizon for you?
Yeah, so finishing up Rotten Sun and The Apartment. Okay. Both of those, the edits are locked, just like finalizing the music and the color and everything. Those are about 12 minutes long. And then Mannequined is the film that I was just talking about with the mannequin kind of thing. That's shooting that in April. It's going to be a 7-day shoot, so pretty big. It's like 38 pages, so it's more on the featurette side. Yeah, okay. And yeah, just like full
line up the mannequins, get them ready to go.
Yeah, exactly. Like everything is kind of in the works right now, pre-production.
Yeah, so. Awesome. Yeah. Well, I bet we can check that out online. I'll put some links in the description. But I really appreciate your perspective on it, and I'd love to have you on the show again after you get this all produced. Is it Mannequined?
Mannequined. So mannequin with an ED on the end. Okay. Yeah. So
okay. You'll have to tell me more about that.
Verbified it.
But okay. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to watching that one because I love the concept of it. Yeah. And so we'll have to have you back on to talk more about that as well. But I really appreciate your perspective on everything with filmmaking. I liked how we got a little bit deeper on the philosophical side of things.
Yeah, we did.
Story. So I appreciate that. But yeah, thanks.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was really fun.